A country can shift course in an instant, not always through a speech, a vote, or a formal decision, but sometimes through a voice that was never meant to be heard. And last night, South Africans did not simply watch television, they leaned in, because when a senior police official played what he described as a private WhatsApp recording involving the president and a controversial businessman, the moment crossed a line from rumor into reality and became a national reckoning where power, trust, and accountability collided in full view of the public. What unfolded on that broadcast extended far beyond a single clip or a single individual, raising deeper and more uncomfortable questions about who speaks to whom behind closed doors, how influence truly travels through the corridors of power, and what happens when conversations assumed to be private suddenly become public property, all while the full impact of the revelation continues to develop and resist easy conclusions. Context matters deeply in moments like these, especially in South Africa where history has taught citizens to listen carefully not just to what is said, but to how and why it is revealed, and the audio was not presented with dramatic flair or sensationalism but framed as information the public had a right to hear, a choice that alone shifted the atmosphere and lent the moment a sense of gravity rather than spectacle. Audio recordings possess a unique power because they carry tone, pauses, confidence, hesitation, and intimacy in ways that written documents never can, and for many viewers the experience felt unsettlingly personal, almost too familiar, prompting ordinary citizens to question whether the playing field has ever truly been level and whether access to power has always been unevenly distributed. South Africa has lived through similar moments before, from leaked calls to secretly recorded meetings, where voices have revealed truths that paperwork could not, yet the country also understands that recordings can be selective, edited, or released strategically, creating a persistent tension between genuine revelation and deliberate manipulation, and it was precisely that tension that made the broadcast so heavy and difficult to dismiss. The identity of the person who made the audio public intensified that weight, because Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi is not known for recklessness or grandstanding but for discipline, caution, and measured conduct, and when someone with that reputation speaks openly on live television, audiences listen differently, not necessarily because belief is immediate, but because the risks of speaking at all are clearly understood. For many viewers, the central question quickly shifted from whether the recording was authentic to why it was being released now, because in politics timing is rarely accidental, and South Africans have seen enough inquiries, commissions, and delayed accountability to recognize that revelations often surface only when pressure reaches a breaking point. The mention of the name Cat Metal further altered the national mood, as it is a name surrounded by controversy, whispers, and unanswered questions, one that carries weight even without formal charges, and when such a figure is linked, even indirectly, to the presidency, suspicion spreads rapidly, not because guilt is established, but because public trust is already fragile. By morning, conversations at taxi ranks, in workplaces, and in homes were not centered on legal technicalities or evidentiary standards, but on simple, direct questions about why the president would speak to such a person, what information might still be hidden, and whether this would become yet another scandal that fades quietly without resolution. These questions matter because leadership is judged not only in courtrooms or parliamentary chambers, but in kitchens, shops, and communities where people already feel that the system does not serve them, and the fact that the moment unfolded live, without editing, delay, or the opportunity to soften its impact, made it even more powerful, as live television strips away safety nets and forces viewers to confront rawness that lingers far longer than carefully worded statements released days later. In such situations, silence becomes deafening, and so far the response from the presidency has been cautious, a posture that some interpret as responsible restraint while others view it as avoidance, knowing that in South African politics silence is never neutral. For supporters, restraint may signal legal prudence and respect for due process, while for critics it suggests panic or damage control, and although the truth likely lies somewhere between these interpretations, perception itself carries real power because political authority depends not only on law but on public belief, and belief is shaped by patterns remembered over time. Citizens recall past scandals where early denials collapsed under the weight of evidence as well as allegations that ultimately faded without consequence, and that collective memory breeds skepticism, leaving people wanting clarity while bracing themselves for disappointment. This is where institutions come under intense scrutiny, as police, prosecutors, and oversight bodies are now expected to demonstrate whether allegations will be handled with seriousness and transparency or allowed to dissolve into ambiguity, because if claims are strong, due process must be pursued openly, and if they are weak, that too must be shown clearly, since anything less reinforces the perception that rules bend according to status and power, a perception felt most sharply by ordinary people. Confidence in leadership does not remain confined to political spaces but ripples outward into the economy, service delivery, and everyday interactions with authority, and when trust erodes, compliance, engagement, and cooperation decline slowly but steadily. As the audio circulates, the deeper story may prove to be less about the specific words spoken and more about what they reveal regarding access, who can reach the president directly and who cannot, and how that reality aligns with promises made to millions who feel unheard and excluded from meaningful influence. No verdict has been delivered and no court has ruled, and restraint remains important, yet vigilance matters just as much because democracy is not sustained by elections alone but by moments when the public insists on seeing what happens behind the curtain. Another pressing question emerges quietly alongside public outrage: what procedures apply when allegations reach the very top of the state, because steps, thresholds, and legal safeguards cannot be bypassed regardless of urgency, as law moves more slowly than social media and investigators must weigh jurisdiction, evidence, and consequence carefully. Each decision made now carries implications far beyond a single headline, and a misstep risks weakening institutions already under strain, which helps explain why some officials retreat into caution even as public impatience grows, though caution itself carries costs. Prolonged silence invites speculation, and speculation spreads faster than verified facts, meaning that by the time official clarity arrives, public trust may already be diminished beyond easy repair. This challenge is not only political but deeply social, as communities already feel disconnected from systems meant to serve them, and history reinforces that feeling through memories of past commissions and unresolved scandals where promises of accountability were followed by long waits and limited outcomes. That history shapes public reception not with outright cynicism but with guarded caution, as people recognize patterns within political circles where loyalty is tested, alliances recalculated, and public statements drafted, revised, or quietly abandoned, revealing that power rarely disappears but instead shifts form. Meanwhile, daily life continues uninterrupted by televised revelations, as parents worry about school safety, small businesses struggle to survive, and communities grapple with crime, and for many citizens the frustration is not solely about private conversations but about whether such scandals distract from addressing urgent, tangible problems. When survival already feels strained, scandals weigh heavier, and trust erodes quietly, not through a single dramatic moment but through accumulation, as each unanswered question and delayed response adds to a growing sense of disengagement. Over time, people stop expecting explanations and lose faith in promises, reducing democracy to a procedural ritual rather than a participatory system rooted in belief and accountability. Yet moments like this also carry potential, as they force conversations that power often prefers to avoid and remind leaders that transparency is not optional but demanded. And while it remains uncertain whether this episode will lead to investigations, reforms, or political consequences, it is clear that the public is no longer willing to look away. The deeper issue extends beyond the audio or the individuals named and centers on whether institutions will respond in ways that rebuild confidence rather than simply manage fallout, because credibility cannot be restored through silence alone. Ultimately, this story is about power, access, and accountability, and until those questions are addressed clearly and honestly, the conversation will persist. South Africans remember moments like these, and the broadcast left behind a mirror reflecting leadership, institutions, and society itself, with questions that lingered long after the screen went dark, echoing in quiet discussions at dinner tables and within communities. Allegations are not convictions, but unchecked power without scrutiny creates distance between leaders and the people they serve, and what citizens now demand is clarity, process, communication, and accountability, because without these, uncertainty becomes the gravest danger. Delayed truth carries a high cost, as unresolved controversies spread their impact across public trust in police, justice, and the integrity of public service, underscoring that transparency matters deeply in a digital age where private conversations are rarely truly private. The most reliable safeguard is consistent ethical behavior, where public statements align with private actions, and institutions face a test of principle rather than loyalty, as courage, more than authority, is what ultimately restores confidence. Citizens, too, carry responsibility, as they must remain engaged without becoming reckless, demanding answers while respecting fairness, recognizing that this story is far from over and that whether it leads to investigations, reforms, or reckonings will depend on choices made in the coming days. Those choices must be taken openly, legally, and with respect for the people who bear their consequences, because accountability is not a single moment but an ongoing process, and South Africa is watching closely.